allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, welcome everybody. Good morning. And we are ready to go. I got a sign-up sheet. You get a raise.
Don't lie to me now.
You get no. All right, and with that, we're going to open up the hearing to SB 448FN, and we'll listen to the prime sponsor. Welcome, Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senator David Waters, District 4, introducing Senate Bill 448. This bill does two things. First, it provides some necessary updates and wording for the state energy plan. It references the executive orders going back to 2004 and the value of the program, and then changes some of the reporting requirements. You'll see here on the first page that it's now bringing that up to date for an annual report, and then also saying where that report should go, and then reporting on the state's progress and outcomes. And then on the second page, if you went back to look at the original 21I 19A on the energy measures state policy, you'll see that this is very similar. It just, since the time that this was first established, we've done some things in energy storage, and also now mentions the purchase and leasing of fleet vehicles of something that's fulfills some of the goals of state energy plans as well. And then it moves on to the issue of the state fleet. You'll notice here that I have an amendment for the second half of page 2. When I was first working on this bill, it seemed to me that since this has been around from 2004, why not put it into the committee that runs it into state statute? And I had some conversation, at that time with before the Department of Energy was established, and with the fleet manager and so on. And so, well, this is the committee that does it, so why don't we have that in state statute? Well, subsequently, I talked with Chris Elms and some other folks in the Department of Energy, and they said that there is some interest, perhaps, on the part of the governor in revising the executive order, because it came out in 2016. It's kind of they've kind of brought it forward to thinking about at some point we probably ought to think about either revising executive order to bring it up to date in some ways, and also maybe think about at that time putting it in statute. So it seemed just to make sense to hold off on that, because that may change depending on what the governor wants to do. So I said, well, all right, I'll just strike that out of here. Now the rest of the bill, if you turn to page 3, is really the heart of what I'm proposing, and this will seem somewhat familiar. I've had a bill we did pass and was vetoed a couple of years ago on the fleet, and so this version of it, I think, represents the consensus of where we're at now. The previous legislation had mandates. It also recommended the Transportation Climate Initiative, which is now dead, and the governor didn't approve of it anyways. So here what it is it provides guidelines for moving our fleet towards low-emission vehicles and, when possible, zero-emission vehicles, and it empowers the state fleet manager to ask departments, as you'll see, to make plans for fleet purchases and leasing, and then particularly notes that when these things are feasible and cost effective, whether the ZEV, zero-emission vehicles, in certain cases may or may not be ones that will do the job, and so exceptions for that. But you'll see the extent feasible and developing plans for transition. So this is essentially a planning bill, and we'll ask the departments to bring forward these plans and for them to be reviewed, and then in particular to Also see how we're doing on creating the electric vehicle charging infrastructure that's needed. And on that front, I want to note that we have money from the Volkswagen settlement, which is being dedicated towards the EV infrastructure for the state fleet. That's what the governor wanted. He said he wanted the maximum amount we could use from the VW settlement to go towards electric vehicle charging infrastructure. I mean, that was his policy, and so that's the maximum is there that we can use. It's several $1,000,000. And then we are receiving $17 million from the feds under the infrastructure bill that was passed, and that too, portions of that will go towards state vehicle EV infrastructure. And then there is another $2.5 billion to $5 billion in grants that are coming down, have already been approved for EV infrastructure, and we will be able to apply for those grants. So might get something out of that. Now, in the amendment, there's also a change that you just will note here that I had inadvertently said the state fleet manager shall, this is on page 4, lines 19 and 20, in coordination with state energy manager, plan to develop of electric vehicle supply equipment sites, and that implies that the fleet manager was going to do it for every EV supply equipment for the state no matter what. And no, what it is just for state vehicles that the state fleet manager should pay attention. That's
line 16?
That's line 19 and 20 on page 4, so that in the, in the amendment is line 15 and 16. And the other change there too is that, since we're not putting the state energy manager in statute, we're just holding off on that, then it references here the folks who are working on the EV infrastructure, Department of Environmental Services, DOT, Department of Energy. Those are the folks who are working on what we need for the state. So those are the ones that will be consulted by the state fleet manager. So it's a planning sets plans, reports, and moves us forward. Just as a little bit of background, I will mention that the fleet manager every year develops a list of recommended vehicles for state vehicle purchase, and for the first time in the last couple of years, it's electric vehicles that are at the very top of the list for the most inexpensive cost of ownership, and also the priorities beginning to be expressed that if you have choice between two vehicles, get the lower emission one, and that would make sense as well. So this comports with what is developing already, and a few years ago, that wasn't the case. These vehicles were not at the top, but now that our major auto manufacturing companies, the major heavy-duty truck manufacturers, Peterbilt, Cummins up in Canada, Lion, are now all moving towards electric vehicles, and our auto manufacturing, Ford, GM, et cetera, are saying they're going to stop making conventionally fueled vehicles.
Peterbilt's, really?
Yeah, in the next 10, 15 years, they're done with them. So that's why they're introducing all these new models. So the landscape is changing here, so let's plan for it. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Waters. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Laura Lee Godfrey? Welcome.
Thank you.
Did I say that right?
Yes, you did. Laura Lee Godfrey. So good morning, members of the committee. My name is Laura Lee Godfrey, and I'm 17 years old from Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to hear my statement today. And I'm speaking on behalf of Seacoast Students for Sustainability, which is a student-led coalition of eco-clubs in the Seacoast area, and we support HB 448. I'm here today because our organization finds it essential that our state government follows through on previously existing goals. In 2016, we wanted to reduce fossil fuel consumption by 25% by 2025 compared to a 2005 baseline, and today we can still achieve that goal if we adopt the measures recommended by this bill. Firstly, this bill expands the individuals to which the annual report on state buildings' energy efficiency is sent, And this requires no additional work or expenditures, but only allows for increased accountability. More individuals would be directly informed of this goal's progress and thus can support and encourage its accomplishment. And this would be an effective way of spreading awareness and promoting action. And secondly, this bill would have the state of New Hampshire prioritize economical energy efficiency in terms of properties and vehicles leased or owned by the state. It furthermore would encourage municipalities to adopt similar standards. Our state would demonstrate what it means to value New Hampshire by showing local governments and citizens the economic and environmental benefit of transitioning to renewable energy. And this would not only have ripple effects across New Hampshire, but it would put us closer to achieving our 2016 goal of reduced fossil fuel consumption. And thirdly, this bill requires the use of zero-emission vehicles, ZEVs, to minimize carbon reduction, or to maximize carbon reduction. This would be an effective mechanism through which to achieve our goal, and it is undeniable that accommodating this aspect of the bill requires indeterminate funds, charging stations, and new vehicles, but all these concerns can be offset by the forthcoming benefits to our environment and our people. Now, the bill does a couple other things as well, namely reaffirming the already established State Government Energy Committee and redefining a state-owned vehicle, but at its core is the intention of reducing our carbon footprint and protecting our environment. This bill would minimize our government's negative impact on the beautiful New Hampshire environment we call home, while ultimately saving expenditures in the long run. It encourages and sets an example for other municipalities and states to adopt green, renewable, and energy-efficient methods for powering government functions. And finally, it establishes a system of accountability and follow-through to ensure we actually achieve this. And for all these reasons, Seacoast Students for Sustainability urge you vote ought to pass on this bill. I will take any questions, and I have a copy of my testimony as well.
Well done. Questions from the committee?
Thank you for your testimony.
All right, Chris Googlen. Well done.
Good morning, Chairman Avard, members of the committee. My name is Chris Skoglund. I am the Director of Energy Transition with Clean Energy New Hampshire. I just want to open by asking that I never have to follow Laura Lee again. She sets too high a bar. So today I'll be speaking in support of Senate Bill 448, which Clean Energy New Hampshire supports, but I'll also be referencing my prior experience where for 14 years I was the Climate and Energy Program Manager with New Hampshire DES and directly supported the State Government Energy Committee and its predecessor organizations for almost a decade. Not wanting to repeat anything that Senator Waters and Laura Lee already mentioned, I would note that the State Government Energy Committee, in coordination with the Department of Administrative Services and the State Energy Manager, have helped the state to avoid almost $50 million in energy costs since 2009. And so by putting it in statute, it guarantees that this work will continue forward. There have been 4 executive orders since 2004, one from Governor Benson, 2 from Governor Lynch, and 1 from Senator Hassan, and it was referenced by Senator Waters. Another one may be forthcoming. Each of the executive orders, as they have come out, have only made targets either more aspirational or made corrections in order to clarify the targets that are there to achieve. So in passing Senate Bill 448, it doesn't commit to any specific goals, but it does allow the governor to possibly set additional ones or more appropriate ones as he sees fit or they see fit in the future. One of the other things that I would note is that with the work that with the State Fleet Manager and the State Government Energy Committee would be doing to support the adoption within the state fleet of electric vehicles is that it ultimately helps municipalities as well. As Senator Waters mentioned, there's been progress to get electric vehicles onto the state contract. I have in my comments under reference 7 a link to the State Fleet Index for 2021. In that time, DIS and New Hampshire DES found that looking at insurance, maintenance costs, energy or fuel costs, and the first cost to purchase a vehicle, that it was in fact the Chevy Bolt and the Nissan Leaf that cost less than any other passenger car. that was on that index. And going forward, as we see battery costs go down and we see more competition come in, we expect that that cost effectiveness would only go down. Any municipality can actually buy vehicles off that same fleet index. So the more work that the State Government Energy Committee is able to do in coordination with DAS would allow municipalities, which are increasingly interested in the fleet sector, to be purchasing their own vehicles. Going forward, we also expect that there would be electric vehicle supply equipment, otherwise more frequently known as chargers, that would also be on the state some form of state contract that municipalities could buy into. And so this could ultimately help kind of aggregate the power or the buying power of the entire state and not just the state government. One thing I did want to note is in the fiscal note, it did mention the costs for vehicle charging at $96,000 to almost $500,000. It does appear that that was referencing DC fast charging, direct current fast charging, which is also known as level 3 charging, and allows cars to charge up to full charge within less than an hour. There are also other alternatives which are more cost effective, not cost effective, but lower cost. Right now at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, we have 2 level 2 chargers, which have a total of 4 plugs. And in that instance, we can plug the vehicles in. They can charge more slowly. They very often charge overnight. But first thing in the morning, those cars are fully fueled and ready to go. And so that sort of infrastructure can be deployed around the state much more easily, requires less infrastructure, less upfront investment. And so the costs here are not entirely reflective of the possibilities. And in some instances, we've seen at least one public charger in the state where a company came in and installed it for no upfront cost. They were going to recover the costs on their own simply by charging for the fuel. So there are a variety of opportunities for investing in this charging technology that may not have such a direct impact on the state and ultimately lower the cost that we experience and pass on to the taxpayers. So I can take any additional questions or any questions.
Questions from the committee? Senator Gray.
What are the trade-offs?
The trade-offs for electric vehicles or for
electric vehicles? I mean, if I do this, what other impacts to the environment? How am I going to get the electrical energy? Let you speak for a while and then I'll ask more questions.
Okay, great. So I actually do own an electric vehicle. I've had, so I'm going to speak a little bit more from experience. I have a Chevy Bolt, 3 years old. We've driven 60,000 miles in the past 3 years. There's been 3 days where we have not used that car, and we've switched to the Subaru instead. It's our primary driver in all weather, all conditions. Currently, at 16 cents per kilowatt hour, it costs me $1.57 per gallon equivalent to fill that car up. So our family and anyone that would be using an electric vehicle immediately realizes a benefit. Electricity, even if under the New Hampshire grid mix or the New England grid mix, is a cleaner, a lower emitter. So even if the electricity is coming out of coal, oil, natural gas mix that we have in New Hampshire and New England, it has a lower emission rate than a standard internal combustion engine. So as the grid continually gets cleaner, and it has been getting cleaner since my tracking of ISO New England's data since about 1999, every year it gets lower and lower. The emissions from electric vehicles only get cleaner and cleaner, and they're already better than internal combustion engines. Electric vehicles are also 4 times more efficient than internal combustion engines, so offer a tremendous environmental, economic benefit, but they also, because they have lower emissions, offer a kind of a societal one as well.
Senator Gray.
Follow up. I was more thinking that electric vehicles require batteries. Batteries right now, the efficient ones that they've got are lithium. Lithium is in deposits around the world, which is causing deforestation and mining in those areas, which is bad for the environment. That we have everybody switch to electric vehicles, then at 5 o'clock at night we're going to have brownouts because everybody's going to be charging their vehicle. Now, again, what I'm looking for is you to testify on what are the trade-offs. I am gaining. I've heard that, you know, from the three people that have tested. What am I trading off?
So do understand, I can speak to the trade-offs about the concerns about everyone plugging in and the impact on load at peak periods between like 4 and 8 p.m. Right now, the Public Utilities Commission has a docket that they will be ruling on that will establish what are called time of use rates that will create a price signal in order to avoid that exact issue. Because there is this concern that electric vehicles are a new form of load and that the grid cannot necessarily handle everyone plugging in. It may not necessarily create brownouts, but what it could do is cause very high electric rates for all individuals. But
So just to follow up on that point, so there's going to have to be either timing of these charging, or there's going to have to be new power plants built, which
So
will also have
with
an impact on the economy.
with the public utilities dockets, what they are establishing for at least 2 utilities, and the New Hampshire Electric Cooperative already has this established, is a low-priced electric rate on the order of, like, say, 8 cents per kilowatt hour, about half of what the current electric rate may be. I'm generalizing. And what that encourages me to do is, if I'm a homeowner or a business owner, plug in and charge my vehicle. And so I could conceivably be charging my car for 75 cents per gallon equivalent. So there's that price signal. Electric vehicles, unlike my range at home, my dryer at home, my kid's AC, my kid's cell phone, those are not necessarily flexible loads because we need to necessarily use them at a certain time. My car doesn't start charging until midnight of every day. It's done by 7. And so by establishing these price signals, homeowners, businesses will have an opportunity to choose, do I need to charge right now? And if so, it incurs a greater cost. But overall, over the course of a year, we'll see a much greater benefit to charging during those off-peak times and away from the times that we would see most people using electricity, especially during the summer. One additional benefit is we would also see electric sales rise, even if it's overnight. We now have more of the distribution costs being spread over more kilowatt hours, potentially bringing distribution rates down for all consumers. With respect to the lithium, yes, that is a concern. However, fossil fuels also have their own impacts, whether it's from oil, coal, or natural gas. Lithium at this time is when the batteries are depleted from an electric vehicle, they're finding that they can be repurposed and used for battery storage and therefore deployed on the grid to also then avoid that same peak period, potentially bringing down the amount of electrical generation that is needed and therefore reducing costs for all parties. When they're done, there is technology and innovation occurring around recycling that lithium so that it can be reintroduced into the economy. So unlike a fossil fuel, once it comes out of the ground, there's potential to kind of reuse that resource over and over again. There will be impacts, but the trade-off is, at this time it appears, lithium will have less impact than the fossil fuel extraction.
In whose opinion?
In mine.
Okay. As you can see, I'm a co-sponsor on this bill.
Yeah.
And so I'm not trying to be argumentative or anything to that effect. One of my goals has always been to reduce our transmission load. This doesn't appear to do that, basically. Right. I mean, you said the costs are going to go up as far as our peak demand?
No. So this bill is not targeting that. There are other efforts before the PUC,
right,
and some of which came out of Senator Waters' bill. I think it was Senate Bill 575 in 2018. But that would have us be establishing time of use rates, which would encourage off-peak charging, which would ultimately move load away, so we wouldn't see our transmission during peak period rise. Other states are doing similar things. So by having the off-peak charging, it has no impact on the transmission.
One question that, and I'll get to you, Senator, I promise.
Sorry,
you as well. I just one thing some of my colleagues are bringing up was that, well, if we get more and more of these electric cars on the road, that's great. It's going to lower the emissions costs. How are we paying for the roads?
I believe that's a separate question, and there are separate bills that are introduced to that.
Yes.
I know.
Just for conversations.
No, the most. so not speaking for Sea and Edge, but speaking based on my prior experience, I understand that at some point, VMT-based fees may be things that we need to consider, where everyone pays equitably. Since I've had my Prius, I've been spending less and putting less into the highway fund. Since I bought my EV, I haven't spent a dime. And so there is a shift in costs, but that is an issue that is being considered by at least 2 bills this session.
I really appreciate it, and I know it's kind of like a swerve one way to the other. It's just one of those questions that I'm hearing more and more frequently.
No, our roads are important. They traditionally had user-based fees, but as fuel efficiency is rising, even for internal combustion-based cars, we're going to see that fund be depleted more as well.
Thank you. We had 2 questions, Senator Waters, and then Senator Murphy's go to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony, and thanks for your, helping me work on this bill back in the day. I'll try to ask some questions that go through some of the issues that have been raised. Isn't it the case that electric vehicles now come with an app that you can time your charging to the least cost electricity?
I can't speak to the vehicles, but I do know that chargers, the EV supply equipment, have that. So my charger at my house, I specifically bought it because it sends me a text that tells me your car's not plugged in. It's 9:30, go plug it in. But at 10 o'clock, I can set it to charge whenever I want from inside my house. And so it automatically starts charging at midnight, turns off at 7 a.m. So that therefore I am not interfering with the load of anyone in the distribution system or the transmission system. And in fact, we have solar panels that are equivalent to powering the entire house. So I'm going too far into my personal stuff. But that technology does exist. The same company that built my charger also has the capability of getting signals from the distribution utility in specific locations around the country, so that when they call events or the price changes, the charger can either turn on or off. So if the price goes way up, we might know that there's been a demand event, some sort of demand event called, so the charger will shut down and then shift its load completely off. But then if the price goes really low, or perhaps the mix is much greener, like there's a lot more solar, there's a lot more wind, then it will turn on.
In terms of the chairman's question about transmission load and so on, I don't know if you were here when we had Eversource report, I guess it was last year before, gave a pretty full report on transmission and generation, and they said that their planning anticipation was that electric vehicles, as they're coming out, is not going to, that they can handle that in their load. And then related to that, isn't it the case that with vehicle-to-grid technology that the utilities are very interested in being able essentially to have the storage capacity of all these, vehicles, so that they can draw the power out of them when there's high demand, and then put it back in when the power is really
yes.
Really cheap, so that in terms of the load and the transmission, that overall this will actually be very beneficial to the utilities and to the transmission load.
Yes, I was actually looking at that yesterday. Most passenger cars sit idle for 95% of their lives. And so if you have a battery in that car, the battery in my vehicle or even a Leaf is more powerful than a Tesla Powerwall. And the same Tesla Powerwalls are being used in the Liberty utilities area up and around Lebanon, where they're dispatching those batteries at times of peak demand to reduce the local utilities' overall energy consumption.
And one last one, if I may. On the lithium side, there are major United States sites and mines, particularly Utah and Nevada, that will be able to provide a big supply. But aside from that, isn't it the case that there is now recycling technology for these batteries that can recycle 95% of the materials? And isn't it also the case that with the new solid-state batteries that we have GM putting $20 billion into have a battery facility, Ford not quite so much, Tesla's already up and running on creating batteries that don't depend on, as much less dependence or any on lithium, and also getting rid of cobalt, which is another metal of concern. Isn't that the case?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Good question.
Leading the witness.
Senator Perkins, quote.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Senator Waters asked essentially the question I was going to ask, which is, isn't it the case that, essentially in the future, electric vehicles can be viewed as an extension of the grid because there are software developments that are allowing us to essentially view those as a flexible tool
Yes.
that the utilities can use to avoid upgrades and actually reduce costs to our ratepayers that might have otherwise been rate-based.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Is there a Griffin Robert here?
I only got a comment on section 4, and I believe Senator Waters, if I heard you correctly, that section's been removed, so unless there's any questions, I'm all set.
All right. Does anybody want to speak on this for the time? Well done. Good job. Seeing that, nobody else wants to speak on it, we're going to close the hearing on it.
What's next?
I believe 263, I think.
Chairman, I just want to let you know, I might step out around 10:10 to go testify on another bill.
Okay.
Be back.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I talked to Chris and John.
All right.
Yes,
Sorry. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. No, but you can, there will be software that allows you to, like, almost like an option, like buy power at certain. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. You
I recognize Senator Waters to introduce Senate Bill 263.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator David Waters, District 4, introducing Senate Bill 263 to establish the New Hampshire Youth Environmental Education and Conservation Council. Just a little bit of history on this. I had a different version of this a couple years ago, but with COVID coming and the omnibus bills, just seemed better not to bring this forward. And also, at that same time, Representative Ladd and I were working on including environmental education and outdoor recreation to be added to the state adequacy standards. And that was done. So that passed last year, and now that those are in statute, it seemed to make sense then to have this, council come forward, because we now have a statutory requirement for adequate education in those areas, and this will be very helpful to us. It also, the bill arises out of a lot of conversations over the last few years about young people who want to become more engaged in working on their future and their communities, and in particular more engaged in the civic life of the state, to be able to learn about things that they're going to affect them and their families in the future. And particularly, I think it reflects from the youth that I was talking to, is just the kind of really deeply traditional concern in the state, the love of the state's environment. And it's a great place to live and to preserve and to conserve. And so, as the purpose statement here on the first page, is essential that New Hampshire youth have opportunities to deliberate on these matters and make recommendations to state policymakers regarding new rules and practices of state agencies and local and state governments. The council, you'll see the establishment here and the membership. I do want to note that we do have a legislative youth advisory council, and that is much more broadly concerned across all areas of state action and government. And so it was felt that while they have on the Legislative Youth Advisory Council looked at environmental issues, that this will provide a much greater focus. Also, what will be different here is that existing council essentially advises the governor, whereas this is going to give advice to the DOE and to the legislature. And to that I think is a very important difference, so that these young people have the opportunity to engage the actual process of establishing curricula, and also the process of state legislative activities. The membership between the age of 12 and 25, want to make sure we've got all areas of the state represented, so we got one from each county, and then we'd have a couple of middle schoolers, a couple of high schoolers, and a couple of college students there. So it's meant to have a wide diversity in terms of age and also regions of the state. Then the duties on the second page. Learning experience as a lifelong educator. Well, this would be a great opportunity to learn about recreational opportunity, open spaces, environmental education, outdoor recreation. Again, referencing those because they're now in state adequacy. And then related to that, particularly the outdoor recreation and the conservation efforts, that economic growth and employment opportunities depend on New Hampshire having a sustainable and healthy environment. Also, they would have the opportunity to consult with state agencies, municipal officials, advocacy groups, scientists, educational leaders, and so on, and then to make policy recommendations. You'll see on Section 3, on starting on line 15 on the second page, make recommendations on educational programs, including environmental education, outdoor recreation programs in schools, direct to youth and their families concerning New Hampshire's environment and changing climate, land conservation, recreational, and other uses of natural resources. And I see there we've got to add an and. Okay. Sorry.
Line?
On line 17, the recreational and other uses, it should read. And then it's going to meet quarterly, which I think would not be too burdensome rather than monthly. It's going to issue an annual report. And I just think it would be a great opportunity, Mr. Chairman, that we provide an opportunity for them to come and, one of our hearings, come talk to us. And that is what the Youth Advisory Council doesn't have in statute, and I think this would be good for us to have. And lastly, I will mention that the Legislative Youth Advisory Council is having its annual meeting on Monday over in Upham Walker, so they haven't had a chance officially to weigh in on this. They weighed in on the last version, which I decided to withdraw in favor, and we do have Laura Godfrey here to give some of her own comments. But it's on Monday I'm going to be presenting the bill to the Legislative Youth Advisory Council, and so by the time we exec on this or have discussions about it, we may have some input from them. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Waters. Questions from the committee? Senator?
What time Monday?
It's 10 to 12, I think, is the meetings, and I think I'm up for about 10:15.
That's at Upham Walker.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Senator. Did you have another question?
No.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Finn? And you're with the same department?
Yes.
And that, just for the record, what is that?
Seacoast Students for Sustainability.
Seacoast.
Students for Sustainability.
Welcome to the committee. You have the floor.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Finn Graff from Barrington, New Hampshire, and I go to Dover High School. I have come here to urge you to vote ought to pass for Senate Bill 263 on behalf of Seacoast Students for Sustainability. This bill would establish the New Hampshire Youth Environmental Education and Conservation Council and is incredibly relevant to our organization because of our belief in the value of young people's perspectives. Unfortunately, the voices of young people are often neglected or outright dismissed over concerns of naivete and impulsivity. However, it is this urgency that the fight for a stable climate needs, especially within governance. The point of no return is growing more imminent. Atmospheric carbon measurements from NASA describe a 35.19% parts per million increase since January 2006. Immediate action would better serve to prevent this, as opposed to the decision to wait it out, entrenched in the belief that someone else will start making meaningful strides towards stability first. America's youth, especially students, have played important roles in revolutions of thought throughout our history. Henry David Thoreau was a 19-year-old when he embraced transcendentalism, which proceeded to take hold of American culture and produce countless works of literature and fuel the beginnings of movements that continue today: civil rights, gender equality, and environmentalism. It was the Little Rock Nine who had the bravery to pioneer integrated public education, upholding the Supreme Court ruling with the assistance of the National Guard. It is time that the value of young people was recognized in legislation, a recognition this bill entails. SB 263 is so important because it integrates the voices of young people into legislation in the form of the New Hampshire Youth Environmental Education and Conservation Council. This is invaluable in the process of reaching a stable global climate before it is too late, a deadline the UN predicts will reach us in 11 years. We are not deer frozen in headlights. We are not fixed in our predicament. An adaptive group of passionate young people such as this is a crucial part of the mobilization it takes to solve this problem. Now more than ever, the human race is forced to reckon with the wide-reaching consequences of each step we take towards the future. The younger generations, those who will inherit the world built in places like this State House, should be part of determining where best to place our next step, instead of watching the future taken out of our hands. I will now take any questions.
Senator Perkins Corcoran, well done.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here, Finn. Not to put you on the spot, but I think your group has been involved in other legislative actions at the local level, right? Like, I think in
I believe so, yeah, in Portsmouth.
cities and towns, yeah. Are you the same group that was involved in the plastic bag?
Maybe. I joined like
Resolution?
last
Okay.
weekend.
All right, thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none. Good job.
Thank you.
Will Johnson.
Good morning, members of the committee. Thank you for seeing me. My name is Will Johnson. I'm 17 and I go to Oyster River High School in Durham. I'd firstly like to thank everyone for being here, as well as taking the time to hear my perspective on House Bill 263, or excuse me, Senate Bill. I'm here today to talk about civic engagement in our community. The fact is that young people do not have a huge say in politics in this country. It's sad but true. Yes, we can write to our reps and senators, but there's no accountability as we cannot vote. At times it can be somewhat disheartening to want a response while getting very little. Today, I am not in school. I skipped class in order to be here to speak with you. This should not be the case. Young people such as myself should not have to go to such great lengths in order to be heard. But here I am. I am here supporting this bill with the hope that future young people of New Hampshire will be more easily able to share our opinions on climate-related activity. I am neither a Democrat nor a Republican, but a moderate and a patriot of my country. I listen to the science, and the science says that climate change is real and is happening in our communities. I am proud to live in a country where I'm able to voice my opinion, as I know that not all people in the world have these rights. In conclusion, I hope that you can join me in supporting young civic engagement and vote yes on this bill. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Well done. Questions from the committee?
I'm sure the chairman will write a note to the teacher.
I was thinking that. Can we write you a hall pass or something like that? We can. Maybe we can do that for all three of you. Are all three of you skipping school today? Okay. Welcome. Anyway, I've skipped school for lesser reasons.
I never skipped school, and you can't prove it.
That's right. All right. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
All right. Laura Lee, you want to, you're finishing the batting up here.
Of course.
All right, well, good morning again, members of the committee. I'm Laura Godfrey, 17 from Portsmouth, and I'm here today in support of Senate Bill 263, establishing the New Hampshire Youth Environmental Education and Conservation Council. New Hampshire youth are the ones who will inherit the environmental legacy that you leave behind. And since this is the case, they deserve the opportunity to have their opinions taken seriously. For our political system to be representative, all members of our society must be included in the decision-making process. When young people are disenfranchised or disengaged from government processes, a significant portion of our population has little or no voice in decisions that impact their water, their air, or their school curriculum. It is essential that New Hampshire youth have the necessary knowledge and capacity to participate in government at all levels. As youth become stakeholders in their communities, they bring perspectives that can lead to better decisions and more productive action. Only youth are the ones who can tell you how effective a sustainability curriculum is, or whether the policies you make today will hurt them tomorrow. This council has the potential to establish capable and civically engaged leaders that can improve our policies. Not only would this council address a fundamental political and democratic right, it's crucial to developing stable policies that respond to the specific needs of younger generations. Right now, I also serve as youth co-chair of another statutory committee created by our state government, the Legislative Youth Advisory Council. And our members are geographically and politically diverse citizens of New Hampshire of all ages. And for the first time, members feel as if they have a voice that will be listened to in government. And furthermore, they become educated on the accessibility of our government and how to impact their communities. Given my experience with the Legislative Youth Advisory Council, I've been able to see kind of the hiccups that we've experienced in terms of appointments or quorums, but this bill addresses all of those. I can personally attest to the impact that it has had on my life. I've been educated on the rights and privileges I hold as a citizen of New Hampshire and the United States, and I've been inspired to major in public policy in college next year, and I'm beyond excited to vote in midterm elections this November. But the reason that this environmental council is so crucial and distinct from the legislative council is because it zeroes in on climate and expands its scope from simply legislation to department programs and school curricula. While the Legislative Youth Advisory focus is narrowed to legislation, this environmental council's reach includes state agencies, advocacy groups, scientists, and more. They can make recommendations on environmental education and outdoor recreation programs concerning New Hampshire land conservation. And this gives youth unbridled access to have a say in protecting the environments they will grow up in. The youth growing up in New Hampshire are the ones who must carry on the torch of our current environmental policy. It is only essential that they be given the opportunity to educate themselves, learn from today's leaders, and have a voice in our state government. For the sake of representing youth and enabling our future leaders to protect our future, please vote ought to pass on SB 263. I will take any questions.
All right, well done. Any questions from the committee? Are you all in the same school?
No. I'm in Portsmouth. They're in, one's in Dover and one goes to Oyster River.
Senator Waters.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for your testimony. You know, one thing I just wanted to focus in on is you mentioned the conservation features of this council, and we did pass the outdoor recreation bill last year that includes outdoor recreation programs in state adequacy requirements for education.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that.
What's your sense of the interest in youth to having, careers in conservation fields, forest ecology, guides, recreational activities?
Well, one of them is here with me today, very much so. So there's definitely an open interest, but I definitely agree that they should be given the opportunity to further pursue it, which is why that bill is so important and this bill is also so important.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you very much for your testimony. Does anybody else want to speak on this particular bill? If not, we'll close the hearing on it. Do we have time to execute? No. Okay, we'll wait on that. And so,
Okay, I guess we're rolling right along.
all right. Senator Gatta, would you mind just taking over for a minute? SB 257, we'll hear from the prime sponsor, Senator Waters, and I'll be right back.
This time we'll open the hearing, on Senate Bill 257, recognize its prime sponsor, Senator Waters. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senator David Waters, District 4, introducing Senate Bill 257. And this would enable municipalities to incorporate sewage disposal systems as part of their stormwater utility. Just by way of a little bit of background, quite a number of years ago, we passed enabling legislation for municipalities to establish stormwater utilities. There hasn't been much action on that side. People hue and cry about a rain tax and this and that, the other thing. What makes this more timely and I think a useful tool for municipalities is what is happening in our Great Bay region with the agreement that has been reached with the EPA to allow the communities, rather than just keep pouring more money into the wastewater treatment facilities, to look at other sources of nitrogen and create kind of inclusive and flexible planning. There's also increased interest as well in around the lakes and the rivers, where there are similarly increasing regulation coming along and need to reduce nitrogen. And you have the lakes letter there about that particular circumstances. For me, this bill particularly arose out of meetings of the Commission on Marine Natural Resources and Environment meetings, and we, as part of our legislative charge, look at issues of nitrogen and environmental health in the Great Bay region, which is affected, of course, by the nitrogen loading that comes in from stormwater runoff and from wastewater treatment and from septic systems. And we heard reports from Dover and other communities about how they're trying to take into account the latest EPA agreement, which Senator Gray certainly knows well and did a lot of work on with a coalition of communities there. And they said that, this provided great relief. They've already spent tens of millions of dollars upgrading their water treatment plants, and they are taking on very creative ways of trying to mitigate stormwater runoff. But that a large percentage of the nitrogen that is going in to these waterways is from septic systems. And also there is the issue that a lot of septic systems are bringing, pumping and then bringing it in to run through the the municipal plants. So what this bill would do then is would change two definitions. It would say that municipalities subject to federal stormwater regulation may incorporate sewage disposal systems as part of their stormwater utility if they have one, if they set one up, and this is purely enabling legislation. And then secondly, makes the needed definitional change up above in lines 3 to 5 to include sewage disposal systems in the definition of water and or sewer utility. So that is the heart of it, Mr. Chairman. I'll take some questions.
Any questions from the members of the committee? I do have a question. Does this mean that all septic systems in a community then fall under this regulation? All in private septic systems? I'm not familiar with 485A2.
Thanks for the question. No, this is entirely enabling. It's only if a municipality, as public body votes to set up a utility. It's only, the town meeting votes to do it or the city council votes to do it, then they would have the option. Now, as you know, right now, we do have regulation over nitrogen levels in septic systems when they're installed, right, and that kind of inspection. But for existing ones and, whatever, we are identifying the non-point sources that's coming into our lakes and rivers and into the Great Bay Estuary, but this would enable a utility. And the way in Dover, when they were talking about this, say that what we'd probably do is say that, have a rebate system that as you brought your system up to grade or when you put a new one in, if you followed the regulations they'd set up, then you wouldn't be paying. For other folks, it might be if they adopt a stormwater utility, which essentially would, the way those are set up is that you judge by the amount of impervious surface. I mean, I happen to have a cottage up in Portland, and they've had one of these for years, and I get a bill for $8 or maybe it's $12. I get a bill every year that is what I'm paying for the runoff of my property into the stormwater system, and they then are not having to, essentially the idea is what they're going to large parking lots and so on, that they're saying that if you're burdening the stormwater system and you're responsible for it, then all the other taxpayers shouldn't have to, pay for that you ought to pay your share. So that's kind of how they would be set up, and this would enable them to be able to incorporate septic systems in that, but entirely enabling, no mandatories, no mandates.
So you may or may not know what percentage of the harmful nitrogen runoff comes from septic systems versus runoff versus water treatment plants.
Well, I think Senator Gray might be able to correct me because it is kind of municipality by municipality, but I'm thinking that we were looking at the figure for Dover and other communities that about 30% of the nitrogen going into the bay was from the wastewater treatment facilities. And now the other 70% is, natural deposition. It rains, right? And there's water runoff. Right. And there's plant material that degrades and so on and so forth. But I would, I'm thinking it's, depending where you are, it could, and dog waste, believe it or not, is a big problem, especially around the Great Bay. But I would say probably in the 20% range, maybe. I'm trying to think, Senator.
DES might be able to help out.
Yeah. I'm sorry I don't have that right in the,
Okay.
right in front of me. But I think that, it's a package. And what this is saying, particularly for the Great Bay area communities, they're now saying, okay, we are made a huge exception to you. We're not going to hammer you on the wastewater treatment facilities, but you have to come up with plans and ways to reduce the nitrogen, because if you don't, then we are going to hammer you. So it's kind of all these, they're looking for all the options to make that possible. And that, frankly, save the taxpayers a lot of money. So.
Thank you. Senator Gray.
Yeah, the question that I have is on line 8, where the word subject to federal stormwater regulations, because right now one of the conversations is that they don't have the ability to enforce certain things on the state of New Hampshire in that. And so I'd like you to comment on those and what the implication would be if I remove those from that line.
Well, it's a good question, and I'm going to need some time to consult with folks in Dover and elsewhere, and I think, our municipalities, because it seemed to me that was meant to recognize where we're at, that federal stormwater regulation covers not all the state, but a lot of our waterways at this point. It's the MS4. Yeah. And now, that agreement that we have for the Great Bay communities is the federal stormwater regulation. So it was meant to, the target was meant that we don't want a community just because they want to go out and somehow regulate septic more than they already are to do that. There needs to be a purpose, and the purpose is because they're subject to stormwater regulations, and that then they can do this rather than just opening the door to anybody who wants to start putting new regulations in.
Follow up?
What I'm really interested in when you do talk to the department about this is there are areas of the state that I don't believe are subject to this now.
Right.
That those words would make them subject to it, even though Dover, Portsmouth, Rochester, etc., may have voluntarily, complied with those or agreed to comply with them. So that's when you do get an answer. That's
yeah. I see what you're. Thank you, Senator. I see what you're saying, and so it sounds like what I don't know if we have a letter from DS. I don't know if we have testimony or not, but it sounds like what you're saying is maybe clarification there that only municipality is subject to, or something like that.
I'll let you consult with them, and then we'll get back.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Hearing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy Woods, welcome. You have the floor.
I'm sorry. Okay. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill. My name is Tracy Wood. I'm the administrator of the Wastewater Engineering Bureau at New Hampshire DES. I work closely with my friends in the Watershed Bureau and the Drinking Water and Groundwater Bureau. So thank you for the opportunity to comment on this bill. New Hampshire DS is in support of this bill. Senator Waters just gave excellent testimony, but I can go over some of those points. I feel that this piece of legislation is an excellent piece of legislation. It it's typical New Hampshire, right? We give our local municipalities the opportunity to enact legislation that they need to help them deal with the situations that they have in front of them. Many of our communities face similar issues, but each community is unique, and depending on where they're located in the state and where they may discharge their wastewater effluent to, they fall under different categories and different regulations. So about half of New Hampshire has private septic systems. And so in that, private septic systems are great, but what they don't do is they don't treat for nitrogen and other nutrients. So they're great at pathogen removal such as bacteria, fecal, E. coli bacteria, but they are not good at nitrogen reduction. So as our municipalities are under increased federal regulation, Senator Waters talked about the Great Bay Total Nitrogen General Permit, which requires non-point source reductions. So as you look at a municipality in its totality, you have your point source discharges and your non-point source discharges. So the wastewater treatment facilities are regulated through what's called a NIPDES permit, and that regulates that point source discharge through the pipe out into the receiving water body. Portsmouth recently did a $90+ million upgrade. Exeter did a $53 million upgrade. Newmarket, I believe, was $14 million prior to that, and other communities are facing these similar, very costly upgrades at their treatment plants to reduce nitrogen. And that's great. But now, once we do that, EPA is now looking more closely at the non-point reductions, and because our traditional septic systems do not treat for nitrogen, do not reduce nitrogen, EPA is looking at further reductions in those areas. So what this legislation does is it allows municipalities to be able to enact or establish a stormwater utility to be able to have a holistic, comprehensive approach to how they regulate septic systems in their communities. It's complicated if you think about your average homeowner. I've been on private septic. I have a connection to a municipal system. I've had both. And you know, your average person, if you're going to put in a system at your house that treats for nitrogen, so you're going to have a more sophisticated system that has some nitrogen treatment on it. Your everyday person, that's pretty complicated. And a lot of those you plug in, and how many people, if you put those in, are just going to unplug them when they're not working. So this allows the municipalities, like I said, a comprehensive approach to how they regulate these systems moving forward. And as we as a state make further reductions in our point sources, that chart swings, right? So now it's, you know, maybe it was 50-50 for your point and non-point source. As we make our point source reductions, that swings, and it's now the pie is 90%. That's what EPA sees. 90% is what's your portion of non-point source. And I think that those are the points that I wanted to make, so thank you.
Well done. I have a couple, and then we'll turn it over to the committee. I do want to follow up on Senator Gray's question with regards to the municipalities being subject to federal storm. Those, could this be a real financial hardship for certain municipalities that will have a difficult time complying?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Communities are going to have to figure out how they're going to make those non-point source reductions. DES has been very involved with, especially like Exeter and Newmarket, back 2011, 13. You know, establishing various programs to help them account for their non-point source, how they're counting of how they're making their nitrogen reductions.
So nitrogen is very, very important, obviously. But, you know, it just dawned on me that if you have a septic system and you live in an area where there's a lot of PFCs or, you know, in the water, that goes into the septic system.
Absolutely.
The septic system goes to the treatment plant. Do they get out the PFCs, or does that go into the Merrimack River?
The PFCs
Yeah, the PFs.
or PFAS?
PFAS, yeah.
PFAS, yeah. PFAS is the word of the.
Hello.
Yeah.
But does that go into the Merrimack?
Well, what happens is it is a vicious cycle, right? So if you think about it, whatever we flush, right, whatever we utilize in our homes, it's going to be discharged to our septic system. Our septic systems are not designed to treat for PFAS.
So
Then you have to pump them on a regular basis to maintain them so that you don't impact your leach field, and then that is taken to a wastewater treatment facility.
my little light bulb's going off real quick, because if the PFAS is going into the Merrimack River and Nashua is drawing off the Merrimack River to drink instead of Pennachuck, are people in Nashua drinking PFAS? Are they drinking this?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
No, there are very strict regulations for
Are they
drinking
able to-
water standards.
Okay.
So there's treatment that that has to be met before individuals are drinking.
I know it's off topic a little bit, but it's my little light bulb going off.
Right. I'd be more concerned if you had a private well
Right.
and you weren't on a public drinking water system and you had a private well, and have you had your water tested? And
Gotcha. Thank you. Senators, questions from the committee? Senator Gatta.
Yeah, I have 27 towns that I represent, most of them with small populations. Would you consider a population limit cap? Because there's no way that most of the towns that I represent could possibly afford a water treatment system. If they were to, again, it's a voluntary thing, but I hear the drumbeat of ever more, mandatory regulations coming down the road. And so I would wonder if we were to limit this to communities of X, communities less than X would not be subject to any rule that comes out of this.
I like flexibility in legislation, and I think the flexibility is already here in the word may. And I think, just as Senator Waters alluded to, each community, is going to have to go, say, town meeting to enact, to be able to establish such a utility, and the townspeople will be able to vote. So again, I like flexibility. I don't like, you take that away from communities when you start putting in certain criteria. In fact, I would go so far as to maybe even say those subject to federal stormwater regulations and remove that in its entirety. And that way any municipality in the state has the choice, has flexibility to decide what's best for their community.
Senator Gray.
I guess this is a would you believe to answer Senator Gaida, that if the city of Dover and Rochester weren't subject to the EPA regulations due to Great Bay, they would be much more in compliance with the wastewater than they are now, and that smaller communities upstream from Rochester, like Farmington, etc., are not subject to those same requirements.
Trying to
You don't have to
understand your
answer.
question. Well,
That's
I'm
a
not
would you
trying to
believe.
understand it.
And Senator,
That's what
would
we
you
do.
believe the senator is
It's a
right.
would you believe.
Would I believe him? He looks like a fabulous person. Yes.
Okay.
Again, subject to the federal stormwater regulations, what do you think the dollar amount would be for a small municipality to have to comply with that? What kind of numbers are we looking at? Say Nashua, just take Nashua for instance. If they said, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to be part of this, and we're going to follow the whatever. What kind of dollars are we looking at? Hundreds of
Nashua's a
thousands?
beast in itself, so
It's a nice beast.
it's a nice beast. But they their wastewater system is probably the most complex in the state, in the fact that they actually have a combined system, and they actually collect the majority of their stormwater flows and send it to their wastewater treatment facility, and then they have a separate wet weather facility specific to that. So Nashua being a CSO community is a little bit different category, and
Okay.
unique in how they collect and treat their stormwater.
Okay, but it could turn into a very sizable amount of money, correct? For a small unit like Franklin?
It costs money. It costs money not to do something as well, right? What's the cost of not doing something when you have a private septic system and, you know, all the other things, right? Not just nutrients, but PFAS. What's the cost of not doing something? So there's a cost to living, right? There's a cost to getting up every morning and getting in your car.
Okay. Senator Waters.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it the case that this bill is not meant necessarily to increase any cost? It's recognized that municipalities are already paying to comply with stormwater regulations. And it's just, the bill is kind of a question about whether, if you want to think of other ways to meet those costs that you already have, this enables you to look at the stormwater utility.
Yes, I agree. It's a tool in the toolbox. It's like you're going to have to pay for it somehow. So how was the best way to pay for it in the community? This gives the community the ability to decide how they're going to do that.
With a may instead of a shall.
Yes.
Okay.
And isn't it also the case, kind of getting back to Senator Gray's question on line 8, that, and you know, I as always with an amendment, it makes all these references to other statutes, and that this was written to look very closely at those definitions, that the municipalities under 31-135 is what we're looking at, and it is basically referring to municipalities that have stormwater and wastewater treatment systems in place, and that they have those, and that those are the ones that, you know, in that definition, we're saying, if you're a municipality, you have this, you may also incorporate this if you set up a stormwater utility. So
Yes.
it is, again, I think I wrote it really carefully so that we're not saying there's any new regulation, there's any hammer coming down on towns or anybody else, is to say that, you know, if you're facing this mandate for the MS4 or other things to do something about your stormwater, this is an opportunity. I mean, isn't that kind of the way, you know, if you go into those definitions, you see it clarifies that some of the concerns about whether this will be spreading around to other areas where we don't want to poke our nose, no pun intended for a septic system, but that's what it's about.
Right, and if there's an inequity in having been on both private, right? So if you have a private septic system, you're paying to pump that out every 3 to 5 years, and that costs what, $300?
350?
350. Okay. Well, then if you're on a municipal system, right, and the people that are on that municipal system are the ones that are bearing all the costs, and so that person may be paying. I currently pay about $1,000 a year. I went from $350 to $1,000 a year. So there's an inequity in the cost sharing of complying with these regulations. So if a community wants to more equally distribute those costs to its user base, that's a way to do it. So just because I have a direct connection to a municipal sewer system, I'm paying more than someone has a septic system, but they need that municipal system just as much as I do. Because if you can't pump out your tank, you're eventually going to have a failed system, and you're going to be looking at overhauling your complete on-site system, and you're going to be spending $10,000 to $20,000.
Which balances out the inequity.
Well, if you pump it on a regular basis, then your system lasts a very long time.
Question.
Is it not true that in the fees that I pay as a septic system owner to the septic pumping company, that incorporates the costs that are levied by the system into which that effluent is taken, correct? So we are, in fact, paying part of the costs for our portion of what we contribute to the downstream effluent.
Well, you are and you're not. You're actually not equitably contributing. If you think about the citizens in the state of New Hampshire and how many people have fixed incomes and how they live, and the people that are in private systems are generally in rural, disadvantaged areas, right? And they need that. They need a place, they need an outlet for their septic. If you increase those costs, right, there's this equilibrium. If you increase those costs, there's going to be people that don't pump their tanks. So
I'm in a very unique situation because I live in the heart of the city and I have a septic. So would my septic costs go up under this bill?
No,
listen,
no.
Only if Nashua votes to do this.
Which,
But not necessarily though. I mean, not necessarily because they.
Nashua's
with a
not
rebate
going to
program,
do
they
this.
would, you know,
well, they'll find a reason to spend. Just kidding. No.
I don't see Nashua doing this,
Okay.
in all honesty, because of the way their system's set up.
Further questions? Senator Gray.
I think that, you know, we're at least into what would be executive,
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm
Meeting.
sorry.
you know, and one last point that, you know, a lot of the things like dissolved nitrogen are never going to make it to the pump because they're already going to go out through your leach field, et cetera, into the surrounding area and possibly down into that brook, which causes, you know, more nitrogen in the Great Bay and supposedly kills the eelgrass, et cetera. So, I mean, this topic, you're only touching the tip of it. I mean, you know, $3,000 and you can put a pre-treatment system on every septic system. You know, we can do that for your house, you know, so that you won't be putting nitrogen or whatever in there. I mean, so
And there's
I think
plenty
that
of federal funding.
I think that when we do exec this, you know, we should have the department back.
Yeah.
And, oh, by the way, the handout that you gave us is only page 1 of the commissioner's 2-page letter.
Oh, there was one, the original head was on single-sided, so maybe you got the single-sided version.
Well, I got a single-sided, I got the original, okay. I got a copy in the email which has, they printed with both sides.
The top one was
But
a
what I got
single-sided
today-
for copying.
You have Harper
Okay.
on this one?
That's all right.
Harper on
I've got,
I was thinking of
I've got
executive
the whole
today.
thing,
No.
but this one here didn't have any, no, I've got it.
All right, any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony and patience. And Gretchen? Welcome.
Hi there, I'm Gretchen Young. I'm the Environmental Project Manager for the City of Dover, and thank you so much for having me here today. I think Senator Waters and a couple of people have already spoken about it, but the City of Dover is regulated by the MS4 permit. And I'm sorry, what was that?
In favor. Yeah.
In favor, yes, in favor. I guess I'll start actually at the end. This is just flexibility, right? These are just options, and that's something that we are all looking for is flexibility and options. So we are regulated through the MS4 program and have been for several decades, and then just recently through the total nitrogen general permit, which is in the Great Bay. And we've spoken a little bit to that, but that's, I know a number of you know, but 12 communities in the Great Bay, and they're facing what could be very large costs at their wastewater treatment plant, or some potentially lesser costs at the non-point source, which is the stormwater. And this has been sort of something that the communities really pushed for, and really push hard to have EPA open up that option, because, and you guys were talking about the pie charts, I've actually got that here. These are some older numbers, 2014, I believe, but 70% of the nitrogen going to the Great Bay is coming from the non-point source, whereas only 30% was coming from the wastewater treatment plants. So it was figured that investments at the wastewater treatment plants really had a de minimis return, whereas the same investment in the non-point source, or even potentially less investment in a non-point source, is going to have a greater impact. And then you had asked about the percentage. It is of the 70% that's non-point source, 30% of that is coming from human waste, which is the septic systems. And that's in the Great Bay, and that's from the Great Bay Total Nitrogen Study that was done. So it is a substantial piece of the pie, and it's one that right now municipalities don't have a lot of regulation on. And Tracy sort of alluded to it, but to treat nitrogen in a septic system, it's this additional thing that you put in. It's a mechanical device, and it does some aeration, and it plugs in. If it's not on, the average homeowner sees the performance continue the same way that it always would. So you just don't really see any difference. But when it is on, it's treating, it's aerating and allowing the nitrogen to be biologically basically eaten up by the bugs that are in the system. So it's very hard to regulate, right? It would be hard for a city to say, you know, we are going to have these high performing nitrogen requirements in all of our septic systems. Short of going out and checking and plugging in people's private systems, you really don't know if they're running. So that's just kind of one piece of the puzzle. The other thing that we're talking about is that while through accepting the general nitrogen permit, we were able to offset what in Dover was about a $30 million upgrade to the plant, we still have upped our need to finance non-point source work. And so over the last year and a half, Dover has been looking at equitable, adequate funding for stormwater. And that was, there was an ad hoc committee that put together, and it was a diverse group of people from our largest real estate owners and developers to your average homeowners. We had some engineers on board and some representatives of nonprofits. Specifically in Dover, it was Wentworth Douglas Hospital. There was a representative from there. And the nonprofits was an interesting piece because they don't currently pay into the taxes or into the general fund. So there was 14 meetings, long meetings. They were dove really deeply into the subject of equitable funding, what is needed for funding, and ultimately they did recommend pursuing a stormwater utility for the city of Dover. And that was presented to the city council last Wednesday, and the city council still needs to absorb it and decide where they want to go. And so there's many, many steps before anything is implemented, or if anything is implemented. But I think at least there's an acknowledgement that it's a possibility, and it's something that, like I said, this broad group of committee members with representing varying different stakeholders agreed that this utility is probably the most equitable and makes the most sense. So as assuming that we do move forward with a utility, we'd like to have as much flexibility in that utility as we can. And we need to show the EPA, as part of our general nitrogen permit, that we're taking seriously the need to remove nitrogen. And one great way to do that would be to start improving private septic systems. And so the way a utility works is that there's a fee, and then there's crediting that can be given, and per state statute, it has to have a crediting system for improved stormwater. If you do any stormwater improvements, there must be a credit for that. And what this Senate Bill 257 would do is allow you to credit for improvements in a septic system. And we think, it doesn't mandate anything. I don't know if Dover would even incorporate it, because that would all go through the committee and go to the council. But I think it would be nice to have that as an option, and it would be a way for us to, really tackle what is on the table, what the issues are, what we're being regulated for, which is the nitrogen. And I've sort of gone off track a little bit, but I hope you see that there's a lot of benefit to this.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Yes.
Senator
Thank you.
Waters.
Thanks for being here. And, it really was a lot of the conversation out of Dover when it came to the commission on marine resources and natural resources and environment. And then I think what was of greatest interest was that idea of crediting, that this is, the conversation is around incentives and the possibility of grants, but also I mean, just to reiterate, it is true that the existing stormwater utility, if you adopt it, is based around a credit system.
That's right.
So that if you know, if you're building a new house and you put in a digester, or if you decide to upgrade, or if a grant comes along, you could upgrade, then you're good to go. I mean, that, not that Dover's going to do that or anybody would do it, but that's the possibility it opens up. And also, if I may just follow up, so it's pretty clear the stormwater utility statute, which this amends, is about municipalities that have wastewater treatment, so that we aren't really.
That is true. Yeah, I was thinking when that conversation was happening, there are communities that aren't regulated under MS4 or total nitrogen that are contemplating pretty seriously a utility. So
yeah. I mean, around the lakes, I hear. And I'll just ask too, again, back to Senator Gray's question about whether on line 8 we just take out subject to federal stormwater regulations. That just taking that out doesn't make really any difference in this bill. Just like a municipality, if they wants to set up a stormwater utility, they can do it anyways, already under state statute, and now they could include this area. So
that's right.
Am I right about that? It wouldn't really make any difference.
Yep. I think you're right. I don't think you have to have it in there because I think.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Further questions from the committee? Senator Gray. I mean, go ahead.
That was lethal.
Great guy.
I don't know which of us should be more offended. I'm just kidding.
Or honored.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam, for your taking my question. So I'm hearing that there's a stormwater issue and a septic issue, and that this bill would enable communities voluntarily to address either or both.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Great,
for the testimony.
thank you.
And Notch? Is there a Notch? Natch. Is that an H or an N?
It's Natch Grays.
Natch Grays, okay. Yeah. Anybody else want to comment on this?
I would like to recognize my former assistant who can't stay away from the State House. Good to see you, Ref.
Yeah, he got to say the pledge this morning. Can we I know. Yeah. All right, we're going to close the hearing on this.
All right. Yeah, one more time. You all are tired of me, right?
Not at all. Today it's
I'm tired of me too.
You can be quoting that.
Oh Lord.
Water's world.
Thank you.
You are recognized, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And oh gosh, what did I do with it? I'm sorry, give me a second. I have some sheet here, which I don't know what I did with it. Ah, here it is. I got it. All right. Senator David Waters, District 4, introducing Senate Bill 445, which would require the DES to adopt ambient groundwater quality standards for certain perfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS. The bill takes two different combinations of PFAS, PFBAs, and PFDAs, you see here, and develop standards for those as well. Well, why did this come forward? It was brought forward largely because of what's happening in Merrimack, and you know, I just yesterday another article about cancer problems in Merrimack, and the ongoing story of catastrophe that PFAS has been over there and is developing in other parts of the states. Now, this is asking for DES to establish MCLs for 3 more PFAS compounds. Massachusetts and Vermont already have determined the safe level of the latter two, PFBA and PFDA in drinking water. And I do believe there are sufficient health studies to determine what is safe for New Hampshire drinking water. And we do know that these two compounds are detected in New Hampshire drinking water. Respect to PFBA, what's happening over Merrimack is that the water system is seeing consistent breakthroughs in their filtering that they put in after St. Gobain and everything, that this chemical seems to be breaking through, and also in the well water as well. This compound wasn't perhaps completely understood at the time of those original settlements and the creation of the filtration system. And we know the Merrimack raised $14.5 million to build new PFAS treatment plants at all 4 remaining MVD wells that weren't covered in the St. Gobain settlement. So they got some from the settlement, but a bunch of other wells they had to put $14.5 million in there as well. And now the problem is that this new category of chemicals may not be effectively taken care of. On PFBAs, it's a short chain PFAS, and these short chain compounds are particularly a problem for the lungs, kidneys, and liver, and the health consequences of that. On PFBA, let's hope we're beyond this kind of reporting very soon, but it also says if you have a concentration of these, you have a worse outcome from COVID. And that's been demonstrated by more severe course of COVID for folks who are affected by this as well. So I know we have a letter from DES with concerns about whether there are sufficient scientific studies and perhaps the cost of these, and I will speak to them on that. And I just hope that there's a way to come to some agreement on this bill. I mean, I think a problem has been identified over there in Merrimack, and if it's in Merrimack, we're going to see it elsewhere as well. These are, a couple of compounds that we weren't aware of sufficiently, and now we are. And what can we do about it? So I will leave it at that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator, for your testimony. Questions from the committee?
I'm going to give a copy of this.
Mike?
That I spoke from.
Did you want to speak on this? Yeah. You're the only one left to speak? So DES in opposition to this.
Morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mike Wimsat. I serve as Director of the Waste Management Division for the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. I appreciate the opportunity to testify here today on Senate Bill 455. DES is opposed to this bill primarily because in each case of the 3 compounds that Senator Waters just described, there's either a situation where the toxicological data is really still under review, or there's simply, we believe there's insufficient data in some cases to actually develop an appropriate science-based standard for these compounds. So specifically in the case of PFBA, perfluorobutanoic acid, there is draft data under review by the US EPA right now. And EPA may establish a health advisory later this year. So this is something we've been watching. But we think that it would be best to wait for that review to be complete, and then for us to evaluate the work that EPA has done and make a determination of what an appropriate standard might be. However, if you look at the current draft data and you accept that at face value prior to its review, which we're not recommending, but if you were to do that, we believe that that would result in us arriving at a value of over 1,000 parts per trillion, or a regulatory value for this compound of over 1,000 parts per trillion. And I would just note that based on the data that we understand, and we have a lot of data in New Hampshire about groundwater and drinking water quality, that would really not have a meaningful regulatory impact. There's really only one place in the state where we're aware that PFBA exists in groundwater over 1,000 parts per trillion, and that's right at the plant site at St. Gobain. So in terms of what it would mean for water systems or for site cleanups, There, as you can imagine, there are lots of other compounds that drive the remedial decisions at that site and at many other sites. So we don't think that setting a standard for this, particularly, there's no incentive to work quickly to try to set a standard for this because it wouldn't really have any specific regulatory meaning right now. And then with respect to PFHPA, we just believe that there's really not sufficient toxicological data available at this time to support, the development and analysis that would be required to set a standard. And then with respect to PFDA, we're aware that US EPA is currently reviewing to see whether there's sufficient information to support an assessment of this compound, and that they're going to release the draft assessment later this year. So again, while we're certainly watching these things, I want you to understand that our environmental health program, the toxicologists and risk assessors that we employ continue to monitor the information as it develops on these compounds, and we're absolutely committed to and prepared to, when it's appropriate, when there's sufficient information, to develop and advance in rulemaking standards for these compounds. But at this time, we think that the directive that this bill would give us is it's just not ripe yet. And I would also note that if it were to pass, it has a very quick deadline to have us develop and promulgate rules. So even if we were to, even if it were to pass and we needed to advance this, we think we'd have a really hard time meeting that deadline. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, with that, questions from the committee. Senator Waters.
Thanks, Mike. And I was asked to bring this forward by folks over in Merrimack, and have perhaps not sufficiently had time to study what's being done in other states. But can you speak at all to what our neighboring states who are regulating this have done?
Yeah, so there are certainly a number of states that have led the way. New Hampshire is one of them on developing and implementing PFAS standards. Some of our states, our neighbors, have seen their way towards developing standards for one or more of these compounds. I'm not a toxicologist, so I would certainly not try to explain to you why our toxicologists and risk assessors don't feel that there's sufficient information, and maybe some other states do. I mean, toxicologists are professionals. They review information, and they have often robust and almost always amicable disagreements about what the data means and whether there's sufficient data. So I really couldn't speak to that because I don't know how or why they saw their way clear to develop a standard, earlier than perhaps we would.
Follow up? Yeah, if I may. So, as I indicated towards the end of my testimony, do you think that, it sounds like DS is saying it's premature, let's not do it. But that there is going to be guidance that comes out this fall, potentially. And my worry is a little bit, if we have folks who, think they're getting cancer, and you understand, the situations about all this. So waiting sometimes makes legislative sense, but maybe it doesn't make health sense. So do you think that a recasting of this bill that would say pending guidance from the federal government and then put out a date into 2024 or something, or just not do anything now?
I guess the department is very sensitive to what you're saying, and I think it's helpful to understand one thing, and that is that in cases where we might see concentrations of these compounds that would be a concern, wherever we might land for a standard, we already have concerns about the water. In most cases, I think in all cases where that would be the case, we already have regulated compounds that are above standards, and so treatment is happening. So if you take, for example, PFBA, if we were to set a standard for that, it doesn't change the fact Merrimack Village District, as you point out, is already treating, and it is true because this is a shorter chain compound. Carbon does not treat quite as effectively for it. So they are seeing, this is the first compound that they see breaking through when a carbon canister starts to become spent, if you will. But it's certainly not at concentrations like 1,000 parts per trillion. I think they're seeing single digit, breakthrough of PFPA. And they're making a decision, which is absolutely within their rights, and I think most people would support it, that they want to err on the side of caution and change out their carbon as soon as they see that breakthrough, or right before they see that breakthrough, so that that's water that they're serving in their system doesn't have any detectable concentration of that. So there's already systems in place to make sure that these particular compounds aren't posing risk in those areas where water treatment's already happening. But to more directly answer your question, I think that it's really unclear what's going to happen with these 3 compounds, and I think that if we let things play out this year, again, DES possesses the authority to propose and promulgate standards under the rulemaking process, whether or not it has a directive from the legislature to do so. So I do want to assure you that we're very aware of this PFAS problem, and our experts are reviewing the data as it comes in, and we're prepared and committed to promulgating standards when it's appropriate to do so. To the extent that there's really compelling information that comes out this year, certainly I think if that were to happen and there were to be a bill next year that would say to give us a specific directive, we'd probably be in support of that.
So Senator Gray.
Is there already a committee or commission out there that this bill could be modified to change the charter of that committee or commission to start looking at these as part of their already ongoing work that would satisfy you and satisfy Senator Waters?
There is the HB 737 Commission, which is known as the Pfas Commission. It has a pretty specific directive to look at and focus specifically on the southern New Hampshire PFAS problem. It doesn't necessarily have a statewide charter or charge, but I don't think the agency necessarily has an opinion on that. But it's certainly, any particular commission's charge could be amended, presumably, to include new topics.
Thank you. Follow up? No. So with regards to rulemaking, with all the information still not out, it would really be kind of like the cart before the horse at this point, in putting you on a deadline and you don't have all the full information as far as how to make the rules. I would imagine that'd be difficult, correct?
Yes, that's a fair way to state it. Absolutely.
Right. Further questions from the committee?
No.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to speak on this bill? Griffin? Every time you come here, you're going to get picked on. For the record, Griffin does not want to speak on this bill. Seeing how there's nobody else who wants to speak on it, we're going to close the hearing. And is there a motion to move into exec?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Okay. Any opposed, seeing none. All right, Senator Waters.
On this last one, just given the circumstances, I'm happy if somebody wants to vote ITL, maybe I'll vote no, but.
Okay.
Are we in exec? Did we vote?
Yeah, we're in exec. ITL?
With full respect for your concerns, but given what, I'll move ITL if you're okay. Okay.
All right. All in favor of ITL?
On 455.
On 455.
Need a second.
Discussion.
I guess before I would second that motion, I would want to hear from Senator Waters about changing the charge of a different committee commission, or putting this into interim studies so that it would have the possibility of doing something.
Thank you, Senator, for that. And I think about, it's the second year, so if we put an interim study, it's done. We can't act on it anyways, and somebody could put in a bill next time. And I'm sensitive to burdening, that commission's doing good work, and has a very specific thing. And I think, as I was saying to the chairman, that for other circumstances, I just would vote, I would probably vote against an ITL, but I understand that's probably the course to take. And I trust DES. I hadn't seen their letter until today, so I didn't really chance to follow up, but I think, Mike's testimony was very, very clear and reasonable, so.
Given those comments, I will second Senator Guida's motion.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of ITL? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Senator Waters is opposed, and that is done. Who would like to take this out? Senator Guida would like to take this out. I would like to 258. We didn't have a chance to exec that.
268 or
258. Senator Waters' bill on the African American grave.
Yeah, and I've got a amendment. And I have copies if people don't.
Is that 0384S?
Yes, it is, 384S. Did everybody have it, or?
You guys have that?
I was still taking some notes on the other one. What bill are we doing now?
I apologize. 258?
You have copies of it, great.
That's,
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, will you have copies?
I'll move on to pass, just so we can talk about the amendment.
seconded by Senator Gatter.
So, you know, after Senator Guida's comment about why 2012, and my answer was at that point, well, that's when we passed the bill to enable research and care for burying grounds. And so that seemed to make some sense to reference that, because that's when we put that statute in place. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, no, let's just start from now. And if there's, you know, somebody wants to do work to conserve or restore one of these burying grounds where it's been identified as African American, well then they can do that starting now. And then there was a need for a clarification here that if we have the effective date up in the above part being upon passage, that this business about the museums ought to take a look at their questions. That their collections shouldn't mean just that you now started to collect African American skulls or whatever, or grave goods. But if you have them in your collection from historical times, you ought to find a respectful way to remove those from the collection and work with the descendant community about how they're going to be reburied or otherwise. So that some minor changes, but I appreciate Senator Gotti's advice on it. And so just to reference the bill, it is really entirely enabling that under existing statute that we have, that people can try to conserve these sites. That it basically adds to that if somebody wants to conserve the sites, they ought to consult with the descendant community, kind of as it's done with Native American graves. And then museums, as we've done for Native American materials, ought to look into their collections, medical societies and so on, and see if they have African American materials, because for almost 200 years this was a real practice of exhuming graves, taking body parts and so on for study. So that's where we're at with the amendment.
Senator Gatter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This opens another concern. If we have, I understand the 2012, and my question was why, and it was because there was legislation at that time.
Yeah.
My concern with this, and maybe you can address this, is that it may open already constructed sites to having to then be torn down or excavated.
I'm sorry, I don't mean just to shake my head.
No.
The existing statute has nothing, is nothing retroactive like that. It says that if somebody, if a grave site is identified and you want to do some conservation work, and also, you know, under existing statute, if there's a construction project and a homeowner or a builder wants to remove a graveyard, there's a process they can do that. And also, particularly, you know, the DOT is exempted from all this. If they've got to widen a highway, you know, they have their own procedures and they've got to deal with it. So this is, in all of that, this doesn't open any cans of worms.
All right, so again, just clear it for the record, this is not, will not
No.
enable
No.
undoing already existing construction that was put in prior to 2012.
No.
Thank you.
And I think that's why, another reason why changing what I changed so that it's the effective date from now on.
Right. Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay,
So I'll move the amendment 0384.
Second.
discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none.
And I'll move on to pass as amended.
And seconded by Senator Gaida. All in favor, or discussion? All in favor of the amended?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Who would like to take this out?
It's Black History Month, isn't it?
There you go, Senator Waters.
Thank you, folks.
Yes, absolutely. Senator Gray, are you all set with 261?
Well, I want to have a discussion.
Of course. 261 FM?
Okay, you guys should have a copy of Amendment 2022-0603S.
Yes.
That
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, 0603S?
Correct.
yeah, I think they all got it.
Yeah, we have it.
Yeah,
Yes. And you may speak to your amendment.
All right. This takes out all of the rest of the original bill except for changing the payment. And I understand that we had an estimate that was quite large in changing the computer system to do that. Since then, I've been shown copies of bills that have, you know, the negative number on it, you know, monthly. I've been told that people who are doing net metering, you know, have those payments made to them on a monthly basis. So I think that given what I've been able to determine, that estimate may be quite inflated. So we pared the bill down, and the section where it says the commissioner can determine the frequency of payment, I thought that was the best place to go in and say that he had to do it at least. I would be open if the committee wanted to even change that to say that, you know, if you give an option for the person to have it either quarterly or yearly or whatever. And that's the reason why I wanted to discuss this before I made a motion on the amendment, is to understand what the committee's thoughts were on that. Either would accomplish the intent of the person who requested the bill. If you have made a significant investment into solar and you are consuming the 20% behind the meter or more, that would leave, you know, possibly up to 80% of that energy that you're putting onto the grid and having to wait 11 months to get your compensation for that. It does seem unreasonable to me that we would do that. So depending on whether the committee wants to accept the words that are in the amendment or make a committee amendment to modify those in some way, certainly would like to talk about it.
You don't have the amendment?
Well, how about, Senator Gray, how about on...
Danny's got it. Well, then...
How about on line 10?
Yep.
Provided that the commission requires the option of payment at least quarterly.
Take out the shall? No, I don't have it in front of me. I just gave it.
Provided that the commission requires the option of payment at least quarterly. And I think that would say the default is quarterly, but if somebody wants to do it once a year, they could. Would that, I don't know if that language would work, but I mean, I'm fine with this myself. I don't really care.
I'm open to either because I wasn't trying to. The way your new words were that if Eversource does find it a significant difference, but the person who is supplying energy one month and consuming energy the next, and vice versa, month to month to month, they may say, hey, yeah, yearly is fine, pay it right before Christmas and I can, right. But that person who has, made that extra investment, would have the option. So I don't object to your words, Senator. And if Daley's got them written down, or we'll soon have them written down after you tell them again, we can.
It would read, provided that commission requires the option of payment at least quarterly.
So we're adding the words "the option."
The option of payment. You got it?
All in favor of the committee amendment?
Oh, I guess it has to be moved.
I'll move the committee amendment.
Okay. And all
Second.
All in favor? Everybody's.
Aye.
I tried it. Okay. All right. Motion on the bill as amended? As amended, Senator Gaida?
Second.
Second by Senator Waters. All in favor?
Aye.
And so Senator Gray will take that out.
This is good. Good work. I mean, you know, this is a fairness issue. Yeah.
No.
We don't have all four,
Oh, that's
our fifth member here.
All right, 270? Are you all ready for 270?
I think we are. There's the amendment, which takes out all the other stuff we took care of in 590. And let me just look at my notes for just a second.
Yeah, just go ahead and pass it out. Having an extra copy doesn't hurt us.
And let me just make sure the amendment, did everybody have it, or I've got copies?
0327. 0237.
0357S.
I have 0237S. That was what I was saying.
Which one is this?
Senate Bill 270.
Okay, we need to do both of them.
Yeah, so, yeah, we all need.
Do you have an extra copy of the?
Let me just look at the dates here. I think, excuse me, I think 357, let me just. Yeah, we don't need this one, we just need 357S,
Okay.
the utilities had one more pass at it and decided to go this way.
Wait a second, I only have. I only have.
0357S, anybody need it? You got it, okay.
I don't have it.
Now you do, here you go, here's some more, have a party.
Okay, you may speak to your. Correct. This is 0357.
Okay, so, colleagues, what this does, I guess I'll move Bill 270 ought to pass. All right, so, the amendment, which I'll discuss before I move. This had the, low-income energy efficiency, the bill originally had those in there as a placeholder, but we took care of it in 549, we're done. So that all comes out. All right, so all that stuff is gone, so it's back to the original purpose of the bill, which is the low, moderate income solar program. And, you know, we passed this program a number of years ago, but we've had difficulty getting it going because of finding, of the process of identifying the folks who could take advantage of it. So that's what the bill does. And the only changes here in this amendment is that we needed to reference the department rather than the commission a couple of times. So you'll see now on line 14, there's now reference to the Department of Energy when it used to represent the PUC. And this is the Department of Energy said, no, this is us here. And similarly on line 23, in this little paragraph, after working with the department and the utilities, they said this lottery thing is too cumbersome. It's going to cost money. So why don't we have the Department of Energy consult with the electric distribution utilities about the best way to deal with finding out who qualifies for it and getting those numbers out to folks. So that's what it does.
Senator Gatta?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Senator Waters, in my original bill, we struck out Section 2 in its entirety. And I'm not sure that this amendment does that.
Senator Perkins Polka, since you are back, I'm probably going to move reconsideration on 261 so that we might consider it for consent.
But we're doing 270 right now.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Guida, you are correct. So we're gonna need a committee amendment.
To repeal, not repeal. Section 2 is struck, whatever the language is, to eliminate section 2 of the original bill.
Of 270, SB 270.
SB 270,
So
correct.
strike section 2 as a committee amendment, 270. Are we all in favor of that?
Yes.
Yes, okay, let's do that. Section 2.
I think it would just say this is a replace all amendment.
I think that would work.
Yeah, so.
All right, so why don't we do that instead of even just doing that, this
So I think-
035S, 0357S is instead entitled, it'll be replace all amendment.
You
that-
can't
yeah.
because you don't have the effective clauses. So
Right.
you can replace up to, but you can't do it all. And
Back to striking
it may be just cleaner to come back and vote on it another day.
I think I've got a section to it, that we could say, that, I'm sorry.
Because my markup shows sections 3 through 5
As well.
that I have a line through them, and then section,
All the way through 8, I have.
yeah, I
So,
guess all the way through 8.
what it would read is that,
Replace all
amend the
that
bill
feedback
by
clause.
replacing sections 2 through 8 with the following, and section 9 is the effective date.
All right, you want to repeat that?
So amend the bill by replacing, sections 2 through 8. Or excuse me, replacing sections 1 through 8 with the following. Yeah, that's 9, that's 9.
Daly, you want to repeat that to me, please? And the effective date?
That's,
Sorry, I didn't catch that, folks. So I'll move the committee amendment.
Second.
All right, discussion? All in favor of the committee amendment?
I,
Any opposed?
I'll move on, 270 up to pass as amended.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Consent.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
I,
Any opposed? Seeing none. All right, so is there a reconsideration on SB 2?
well, you want to say that Senator Waters is going to take this out?
Nah.
Oh, okay. Then I'll
Daly's
put
gonna take-
A-bar down on my
Daly's
paper.
gonna take this out. No, but you'll need the blurb today.
Okay.
Anything on consent, you need the blurb today.
All right, so I will be watching my email daily.
Yeah, we'll need the blurb today. And so is there a reconsideration? Okay, so Senator Waters will take it out. Is there a motion?
Reconsider on 261.
Second.
Second. All right, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Is there a motion on 261?
I move ought to pass as amended.
Second.
So we gotta do the
And-
amendment. We gotta do everything.
Okay.
So you can move the committee amendment.
To catch up, we presented Amendment 0603S, and we've modified the words on line 10 so that between requires payment, we put in the option
Of.
which now says it doesn't have to be quarterly, but quarterly has to be one of your
I
options.
recognize that.
In other words, they're gonna still pay every year to most of their customers unless the customer wants. And I'll remove the committee amendment.
Second.
As in moving it forward. It is so moved.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, not removed, but it is motioned as I move. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Is there a motion for consent? Or
You gotta move the bill first, no. So,
Ought to pass
ought to
as
pass
amended.
as amended.
And so it is.
Second.
In the discussion, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, is there a motion for consent?
Moved.
By Senator Gaida. Seconded by Senator Perkins Quokka. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And Senator Gray, would you like to take this out? Please?
Certainly.
Absolutely. All right, listen, we have some people still in the audience. And on that youth council bill, what are your thoughts?
I'd like to go into caucus.
You'd like to go into caucus, all right. What number is that anyway?
263.
263. All right, can you give us a minute? All right. Senator, are you okay with that?
Certainly.
All right. We can go in the other room.
Yeah.
Not all of them, just 261, I think it's this one. Yes. Yeah. That one, and then 270 for that. Oh, you one minute. I didn't realize you were sponsors, but I'm sorry. I did, but I couldn't understand it. I wasn't, and so, I just want to Yeah, jump to the end, it's just making sure it's all close. Yeah, it's weird. Amending the amendment, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, just talk to Courtney on that one. Should I draft it? No, that's Jeff, just draft it.
so I'm gonna recognize Senator Gray.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to defer executing on this bill to give us a little time to look at the requirements and make sure that we have an opportunity to look at who's appointing and those issues.
All right, with that, we'll hold off a little bit, and I think I'm going to look at
Okay, so we won't vote today, just to clarify for the audience.
We're not going to vote today. We're going to have further discussion.
We'll keep you posted.
Okay. Okay.
341.
Okay. 341.
Yep.
What do we got? Okay. Oh, okay. Sure.
Is there a motion on 341 with discussion?
I would move up fast. But maybe, I don't know, hold that back. It's Senator James' bill, so I'll let you guys decide what to move what.
Mr. Chair, my notes say that page 4, line 8, change shall to may, so I don't see an amendment from anyone, so I would move that as a committee amendment.
That's what I have.
Second.
All right, so
Someone's got to move the bill.
Move
That's
ought
true.
to pass on the bill.
seconded by Senator Waters. And a motion for committee amendment, page 4, line 8, changing the word shall see to may see. Excuse me. Because there was an issue with separation of powers. All in favor of the discussion? Yep. All in favor of the committee amendment?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Further discussion?
Yeah, Chairman, I mean, I guess we can act on this today. I don't know if I'm comfortable voting in support today, just because I think I'd like to hear more about the settlement agreement that was reached. I guess I'm concerned about the precedent of that's interfering in an agreement that was signed by a municipality, but I'd be interested in discussion
I
on that.
would second that sentiment.
Okay.
I'm concerned, yeah.
Okay.
If I may, my advice on that is that, this issue about Sinkholes basically litigated until the cows come home and drink the water and die, okay? You know, and I know it's being said, I know we had the DIA, I know we had the DOJ, successive reservations side. I still think it's good policy that this problem has arisen, that these costs are there. We don't think it's fair that the taxpayers should bear them. In the health crisis, I could have waived that article about the cancer, woman with cancer over there again. So that, you know, and this happens with a lot of things we pass, right? We pass things and the interested parties will maybe go to court over it, but I don't think that should stop us from making policy. We don't have to vote today, you know, but thinking about it, that's where I'm kind of coming around.
I just don't have a backup with a lot of these bills, but I'd like to move forward with it if at all possible.
Well, if it helps you, Chairman, I think one piece of information that would be really helpful for me is there was an indemnity clause mentioned in the settlement agreement. I will, if I could look at that specific thing, then I would be ready to act. So maybe I can do that between now and when we meet again. That works for you?
Does that work for you, Bob? All right.
Okay.
All right,
Thanks.
so we'll
I'll
hold
do
off
that.
on that.
Thank you, Chair.
It's spoken by the lawyer and well spoken.
I am. I'm general counsel for a solar company. Okay, I will do that.
We'll wake him up later.
That's on purpose.
So I'm waiting for some, 269, we've got to have a hearing on that. Options are moderate. We just did that one, 270. Waiting for amendment for bio.
Okay.
From Senator Bradley. Still. And so we're gonna hold off on this one. Did we do, relative to solid waste management, 396? We did not do that one yet. Did we do 396? That's Senator Kavanaugh.
Considering the source of what you're trying to say.
No, it's a good bill. Okay, good.
No, we haven't done anything. We had the hearing, but we haven't done anything.
Right. Is there any discussion on 396?
396.
Relative to solid waste management?
Mr. Chairman, well, I suppose I should move so we can talk. I'll move on to pass.
Is there a second?
Sure.
Discussion?
So, we did have, the one point of discussion came up was changing the word shall on to and may.
Yep, right.
Yeah.
And that, to me, makes this pretty inconsequential. I mean, not in a bad way, but I think that means that we're trusting the department to do this. And, you know, and I think the department was very reassuring. It's testimony. They're not just going to go out fishing for more people. It's just that if they feel there's a particular case suggests that we ought to have a disinterested third-party hydrologist, then why not? So that's, I think, given what we've been through with Dalton and now and with Coakley and everything else, that this is becoming an increasing area. We've got to know what's going on in groundwater.
And so that, for the record, is on page,
It's line 3, first page, the only page.
Line 3, yeah.
line 3.
So it's not saying they have to, but they have that option, which I think kind of makes sense.
Turning into May.
You know, they have that option.
You got the talent in-house, or if the presentation by the company is credible, then the may, I think, serves the purpose much better.
Right.
I'm not going to go fishing.
Right. Or if a previous study had been done. Yep.
My sense. But
So I'll move the committee amendment changing shall to may line 3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Gail, you want to repeat that back, just so I know what we got to read?
Line 3, we're changing shall to may. The department may enter into the agreement.
Okay, it says that the application failure, blah, 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 line 3. All right, so we're good?
Yeah.
All in favor of the committee amendment?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none.
Move the bill as amended.
Senator Guy moves bill as amended. Second by Senator Waters. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none.
Move consent.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of consent?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Senator Guy, did you want to take this one up? Right the floor?
No, Daily will recommend.
Got lots of floors to do today.
Yeah, a lot of players today.
All right.
David, did we act on your 258 yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. That'll be next one. I think that's all I have for today, unless somebody else.
I hope to have the kind of tweaks to the school lead bill by next week. I heard again from Leanne about some stuff, and I'll just see if I can.
Is that whose bill?
Yeah.
I appreciate Senator Waters' work.
Yeah, we'll see what she can do. I think we're kind of going to be there. Need some more talk about the 1 and the 4 and how to make sure that the grant funding is covered folks.
Senator Spoker, do you
Yeah.
have an amendment for your bill?
455. I had an amendment for your bill, and I gave it to the committee.
Okay, and that is for?
That is for 259, and the purpose of the amendment was to take the changes that my bill made and put them into your bill.
All right.
So
258, right?
259, I think. So, Daly, you would have that, but it's from probably 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Is it from me on 259? Okay.
Thank
I'm gonna hold off, but we'll take the amendment.
Okay.
And, because I think there's another amendment on the page.
Okay.
I don't know if you need your own.
No, that's fine, thanks.
I'm gonna hold off, and so with that, I will, ask for a motion to get that over to Zach. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye,
Any opposed, seeing none, and with that, we will
okay,
be adjourned.
thank you.
Are we all in favor of adjournment?
Well, you better believe it.
Well done, you did a lot of good work, nothing personal. Yeah. Which one?
The other two had, like, I think it was the Black Heritage one we had done before, or whatever. Let me look. Yeah, but we didn't